has changed. America has changed. If something were to happen tomorrow, how self-sufficient would you be? Could you grow your own food? Could you sustain your own livestock? Could you survive? This is the We Grow Our Show with Nick and Don. Nick and Don talk about everything from politics to planting. They cover techniques, methods, and tips on how to not only survive, but thrive. Visit the website at WeGrowOurs.com. Lock and load. This is the We Grow Our Show. Get your grow on.
Welcome to the We Grow Our Show.
Lock and load. It's another episode.
Lock and load. It's another episode. Oh, yeah.
So we're going to be having some fun today.
Yeah, we're going to get you guys in on the buzz of bees.
Yeah. We've got a really good guest out of your home state, right?
That's right. I didn't even know he was from Wisconsin until I called the number up and I caught the, whoa there, don't you know? No, actually, we were about 15 minutes into our conversation before I even found out that he was in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So this is Charles?
Yeah, Charlie.
Charlie from Beepods.
Beepods.com.
Beepods.com. Yep. And he's got a really cool, we kind of did a little looking around and we wanted to do a show on beekeeping. Yes. And on bees, and Charlie really fits the bill because he's not just a beekeeper, he's an entrepreneur, and he invented really a different way of beekeeping.
Yes, that's he's bringing us out of the paradigm of the backfield beehives.
Right.
This is more of an intimate backyard beehive.
And he's talking about having beehives in the city.
Yeah.
In your backyard, on your back patio, that type of thing.
Yeah, and I'm actually kind of playing with the idea that I might get one of these pods.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to. My fear out in Arizona is the Africanized bees. So we're going to touch a little bit about that. But this is only episode 1 of the bees. Or part 1, I should say. We're actually going to have, I'm hoping next episode, we're going to have a part 2 to this, which is going to be a local Arizona beekeeper who's going to discuss the Africanized bees and kind of how here in Arizona you can keep bees because he's local. He's in Arizona here. I know not all of our listeners are, but we have this Africanized bee problem. So he's going to discuss that because he removes hives as well for a living. So today we've got Charlie on and his product, and I think everybody should go to his website and check that out. Yep. And then next week, beepods.com and Facebook as well at facebook.com/beepods. I'll put the links in. Go to the website.
I know he's got a Facebook link on his website, so you can click on it there and it takes you to the forum.
Yeah, and we'll put the links to his website, his Facebook page, all of that good stuff. We're going to have a conversation with him about bees just to kind of get us up to speed on what they are. And I know that sounds weird, but I don't know exactly why they produce honey. So we're going to ask that kind of question.
Exactly. Well, as you all know, I've got a bit of an interest in poop. And when I was 12, I was convinced that bees pooped honey.
Yes.
And I would always tell my sisters they'd be making a little sandwich or whatever. Like, oh, you're getting a bee poop sandwich there, eh? Stop it, you're so mean.
Nice. Nice. So we're gonna learn about bees. So let's just go ahead and get right to it. Do you have anything else you want to add before we introduce and get to this bee thing?
No, we usually say get your grow on, but let's say get your buzz on.
Get your buzz on.
He's going to tell us what's buzzing in southeast Wisconsin. Is that right? You're in the Milwaukee area, right, Charlie?
That's right. That's right. Chilly, Wisconsin.
Chilly, Wisconsin. Well, in Wisconsin, having been born and raised there, I know there's 2 seasons in Wisconsin. Could you tell me what those 2 are?
Construction and winter.
That's right. Winter and road construction. And it seems like your winter's kind of been lasting a little bit longer than normal.
Yeah, we had an exceptionally bad year, bad for bees, bad for all of us, and it doesn't seem to want to let go. May 1st, and we had snow flurries yesterday, and it's in the 40s.
Oh, geez. So you just mentioned that it's not good for bees. We should probably jump into that since that's why we got you on the phone here. You've got an interesting hobby turned business. You're playing with the little buzzers.
Yeah, I became a friend of the bees. I even changed my name to Charby when I'm wearing them, kind of.
Charby sounds like you're out there with a flamethrower after the little guys. No. So
not even using smoke and stuff. We use turkey feathers, not smokers.
really,
We're trying to be nice to the bees, and you know what? When you're nice to the bees, they're actually pretty nice back.
Interesting. So what got you interested in bees? That's usually when people hear, "Oh, we've got bees," they want to call a beehive removal expert or something like that. But you took a different approach here. Why don't you give us a little background?
Yeah. My upbringing as an industrial design and graphic designer, and I ran an Apple Smart Studio or an Apple computer business teaching people how to think different about computers back in the days when nobody knew what desktop publishing was. So I ran a company that had about 20 people in its heyday, and we worked with ad agencies and design firms and people that were trying to embrace desktop publishing or desktop technology. So I didn't care about bees or bugs at all. I was pretty much just an artist or a Mac person trying to go up against the PC world or something. And about 2002, Apple was kind of opening up all of their stores all over the place and pretty much making my business pretty negligible. And my sister told me about an urban farmer named Will Allen in Milwaukee who had a place called Growing Power. And I went over to visit him one day and kind of fell in love with the whole urban agriculture thing and hadn't really even cared too much about that. I was focused on computers and Photoshop and animation and stuff like that. And I went over and helped him to do a little bit of marketing by taking pictures and doing some graphics and doing some layout work for his urban CSA. And one of the things he had in the corner was bees. And I asked him if he'd come out for a photo shoot and take some pictures of them. And he said, no, I don't like bees. So I was like, wow, Big Will Allen doesn't like bees. I'm not sure I like them. So I checked in with some friends that had digital cameras that I had gotten on, to go digital from regular normal cameras. And I said, hey, just give me one of those ones with big lenses so I can be pretty far away from these bees but still see them up close. And sure enough, I had a really nice one that I could be pretty far away, and a very good beekeeper from Chicago, Mike Thompson, came up, and it was he that kind of got me to feel safe enough to approach the bees, and when I did, I fell in love. It wasn't about the honey, it wasn't about the money, it wasn't about any of that stuff. It was just looking at a superorganism of fuzzy little bees that didn't jump up and kill me like I had thought they would.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, that was it. Then I wanted to become a beekeeper, and they needed somebody to do beekeeping, so a friend of mine and I started doing beekeeping there, and because I'm an instructor and teacher and kind of paradigm shifter, I kind of did the same thing and started teaching bees there. So I was teaching people to think different about bees. And lo and behold, there was a whole lot of people about 2002, 3, and 4 that were starting to do shifts themselves, downshifting or looking for different jobs after a bit of a tough economy. And older people and younger people were trying to look at bees and beekeeping. And I looked at the stuff that I got, which was those stacked box hives, which most people associate with beekeeping, the white boxes off in the distance,
Right.
People with the white suits and the little smokers.
Off in the distance being the key phrase there, right?
Yeah, very much so. and I thought, well, when you lift up one of those boxes, there are several stacked up on top of each other that contain a bee colony. And when you start lifting off some of the upper boxes when they've been doing their work and filling it full of honey, it can be very heavy. Sometimes it's weighing as much as 80 pounds when they're full of honey, and they've got, 5,000 stingers in them. So you don't lift it off very quickly. You've got to be pretty careful about it. And I'm looking at some of these old people that are wanting to do beekeeping because their uncle did it or their father did it or somebody did it or something. And I'm like, can you lift 80 pounds at shoulder height and carefully set it down and do this on a regular basis? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, then you should look at maybe worm composting or something, because bees might not be in your future.
That's right, shift insects.
So I started working with some friends on a different way of doing beekeeping. And it was something that had occurred to me that when I got into beekeeping, when Michael was like, hey, you should do this, I was talking to local beekeepers like you typically go and talk to somebody, and they said, well, you go get those stacked boxes and get busy. And so, I did. And about July of that year, I had about 5 or 6 boxes stacked up, and the bees were doing great. And lo and behold, I'm like, well, what do you do now? And it was kind of funny because back in the days, and still today, some people, the old beekeepers, they're quick to say it only costs a couple $100 to get started or something. And so I had a couple $100 at the time, and I spent it to get the boxes. And here I am with all those boxes full of stuff going, so now what? And the old beekeeper's like, well, now you get a spinner, a centrifuge, and you extract that honey. And I said, well, how much does that cost? And they go, oh, they start about $200. And I said, well, what about the $200 I already spent to get into this? I'm kind of, so lo and behold, most of that stuff is sort of a back-ended proposition where it costs you a couple $100 to get the boxes, but then once they start producing, it can cost you much, much more. Mm-hmm. I also realized that it was work with a capital W-O-R-K, and I already had a job, so I was kind of looking for something a little bit more playful. So with all of those thoughts in mind, and me being an industrial designer, I kind of thought, let's try and reinvent the beehive. It hasn't been messed with for 150 years, and to people who are in the industrial design field, that's ripe candidates for a redesign.
Yeah.
So I went and talked to a bunch of people that were, those industrial designers and graphic designers and people who I had taught to think different with my company, and said, hey, let's rebuild a beehive. And so with a few of them together with a couple of Milwaukee's finest beverages, after hours, we sat and drank beers and tried to make different kind of boxes. And we
did this meeting take place? Did this meeting take place on like a down tailgate of a truck? Because that seems to be in Wisconsin. It's like there's a certain catalyst for brainstorming, and it's alcohol in the back of a Ford or Chevy, something like that. I'm pretty sure that's the equation. But
True. Except for that, we have those 2 seasons that we have to contend with, and
that's right.
And most of this work was done during that cold season. So we could drink a bit during construction season. During wintertime, we had to huddle up inside. But yeah, so we used, CAD programs and CNC machines that are, all kind of, descendants of the computer revolution. And we were able to take an ancient design of a Kenyan top bar hive and kind of rethink the way the bees work in it. And so was born bee pods. And I guess the pods part came because I had apple in my blood, so it was a question of should I call it a bee pad or a bee pod, and I went with the bee pod. But yeah, so then it took a few years to perfect how it works and to make it compatible and to turn it into what I hope will be an industry standard or a benchmark for an alternative way of being able to keep bees. And the idea is not to say don't do them in the stack boxes, but to say, I'd like a choice. Because it seems like the way the world's working is if you want to get into beekeeping, you pretty much, it's like going into a car dealership and saying, my daughter's now 16 and I need to get her a car. And they're like, fine. And you ask them for the car and they hand you keys to a Peterbilt, to a semi. And you're like, well, I was thinking like a coupe or something. And I'm like, well, we don't sell that. So all we sell are just semis. And I think the stack box idea is kind of like that. So the Beehive is kind of like a coupe in the beekeeping world. It's sort of a hobby beekeeping, or beekeeping for the bees is what we call it. So it's geared more towards giving them a protected space that you can have a dialogue with. And it's not so hard on you and it's not so hard on them to be able to do this. And in that, you get to have a closer relationship with this superorganism or bees than you have been able to do using the stacked boxes. Now, you don't get as much honey, but it's no less rewarding.
So what?
I think as I started, go ahead.
Well, what you said, you don't get as much honey. I don't know anything about beekeeping, and it's something I'm fascinated with. How much honey do you get out of bees, and how many bees does it take to give you any honey?
So in those typical stack box type things, depending on whether you're in the fields or in the city, you can get anywhere from 60 to 200 pounds of honey from one hive.
And that's an annual number, or is that?
That's an annual number.
Wow.
It's an annual number from gathering maybe 1 or 2 times from the hive. But yeah, if those boxes are 80 pounds big and you got 6 or 7 boxes, 6, 8, 48, that honey can take a lot of, it weighs a lot, takes up a lot of space. So yes, but what's really interesting is what it takes the bees to make that. So a bee can live for 30 days, longer in the wintertime, but in the summertime they live for about 30 days. They work themselves to death pretty much, the females, the ones that do most of the work. And during that time, guess how much honey one bee can bring to the hive? What do you think?
I have no idea.
A cup.
A cup. That's good. So closer to a 1/12 of a teaspoon.
Wow.
So like a drop. Now you got to take into consideration that the stuff that they're collecting is nectar, and nectar is like the sap that comes from a tree. And when you cook down sap, it turns into syrup. And you know a little bit about catching sap from trees, right?
A little bit, yeah. They have maple harvesting devices out there.
Yeah. So you bring a lot in, and then you have to cook it down before it turns into the thick stuff that becomes syrup. And bees have to do the same thing. They bring in something that's a high moisture content, and they have to use their wings and sort of dry it down. They blow on it. They dry it down until it gets to about 11%. And when it's 11% moisture, then they cap it. And when they cap it, it becomes basically the only food on Earth we know of that doesn't have an expiration date. It becomes edible forever. And it takes an entire colony visiting the equivalent of 2 million flowers, and the equivalent, if we consider that these colonies, each of the little bees that are flying out are going about 2.5 miles, collecting from about 1,500 flowers per trip, and taking about 2.5 miles on each one of these trips, 2 times around Earth to get 1 pound of honey.
Wow.
So 55,000 miles worth.
That's why it's so delicious.
Driving. Yeah. So next time you drop a little bit on a table, wipe it up because it's like a trip to Florida.
I like that. So that was you answered my question, but I'd say 90 to 95% of the world doesn't know exactly what honey is. Yes, it comes from bees. Yes, it's produced from the nectar that the bees gather. But, I mean, you've got a living organism that's carrying around these things. My first thought was, well, maybe they're eating it and relieving themselves in the hive, and since what they're eating is sweet, it's their poop. But that was my 12-year-old self trying to annoy my little sisters by saying, "Oh, you're eating bee poop, huh?
Yeah,
oh, you're eating bee poop."
And understand too, Nick has something about poop. He's fascinated by poop. So
thanks, Don. Thank
I
you.
like it.
So
it's more like they're eating bee puke, I guess, but not really. So they've got a really interesting stomach system or gut system. And in fact, when I do bee classes, when I teach people about bee classes, I talk about the 3 cast members that are in the hive, and then the 4th one that is actually the most important. And the 3 cast members inside of the hive are the queen and the workers, who are predominantly 90-95% of the hive are these workers, and they're all the females. And the boys, the drones. And the drones occupy about 5% of the hive and then rise up if the hive decides it wants to make a baby or to become a new superorganism. But the fourth member of the hive that is the most important are the gut microbes that exist within the digestive system of the insect. And like the ones that we have in us that we're just now starting to understand are so important and are getting so destroyed by the chemicals that we're using in the world today and the lack of natural foods that we have created these gut microbes with over the billions of years of being alive. The same thing's going on with the bees, only their tummies are smaller. They still have more gut microbes in one bee's guts than we have people on Earth, but it's still a very balanced system. They just kind of get thrown off whack. But so to get back to what you're saying, the system that they have has this funky stomach in it that allows the nutrition to pass through and become waste and poop out the back, but the nectar stays up front, and they regurgitate it or kiss their sisters when they get inside of the hive, and they have this long tube called a proboscis, and the proboscis is what they stick down into the flower to gather this nectar through a straw. And when they come back to the hive, because they only live for 30 days, 20 of the 30 days that they're alive, they spend inside of the hive doing housework, never even going outside, just doing things around the house. It's only the last 10 days of the bee's 30-day life that it goes out and starts to collect the foods and resources and things that the hive needs to live. And during those 10 days, its job is so important that it doesn't go into the hive much further than right by the front door to unload. And when it does, it kisses its sister and exchanges that little bit of nectar that's in the little nectar stomach that didn't go further down. And the sister transfers with a little bit of enzymes that come from their heads, bee magic if you want to call it, a little bit of this bee magic along with that nectar to the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one as they kiss and transfer this small little bit all the way through the hive until they get to the bee that's up in the top that's supposed to put it inside of one of the honeycombs in their pantry. And then once they fill that up enough, then they all come in at night and they're moving their wings and creating that air that's supposed to blow and dry this honey to thicken it up, dry it out, thicken it up until it turns into the nectar of the gods, the stuff that has no expiration date.
So this is, I always look for the motivation in things. What would cause the bees to want to do that? It seems like they get their nutrition from the plants, or from the stuff that they visit, and they bring that back and they give the nutrition to it. But what purpose is the honey to the bees?
Good question. So two things. Bees know that there are cyclical seasons. And so with this cycle of either winter, summer, or construction, of winter, summer, or just a dry spell or a wet season or something like that, they realize that the food sources will ebb and flow. And so in the case of up here in Wisconsin, the ebb is very definite. We, have snow and there are no flowers. So by the end of fall, when plants have been taking the cue from the sun's changing of time in the sky and the temperatures of the earth responding to it, they stop blooming and start putting all their energy in roots to prepare themselves for winter. And honeybees are a superorganism, and they realize that unlike their distant and often maligned by cousins, the wasps and hornets, honeybees need to keep their queen healthy and fresh because she's the heart of their superorganism. And to keep her viable and fresh, they need to maintain a temperature around her between 85 and 95 degrees all year long.
Wow.
So all winter long, even up here where we had 2 polar vortexes and temperatures down into the minus 50s, inside the center of the hives that we had in our backyard, the temperature was 85 degrees.
Holy cow.
And they have to do that with fuel and with this amazing product that acts like an electric blanket. So honey is their food and their heat source. And it became really apparent to me this year when we had these polar vortexes, and a lot of people needed to get new batteries. And they needed to get new batteries because when we were down to minus 50, the cold cranking power of some of these batteries that were only a couple of years old couldn't turn over that cold metal engine with that really cold, thick oil that's supposed to lubricate the cylinders because it hadn't gotten heated up, right? So you turn your car on and it's and struggling to start because that oil is thick as pudding. But as soon as you get the car running, that oil starts to heat up and becomes viscous. And the next time that you turn the car off and turn it on after catching a coffee or something on your way to work, it starts right up.
Right.
Same type of things going on inside of the hive. The honey that they have in the honeycombs of their hive are like blankets. And they come up inside and they start to create friction or heat around that honey. And that warms up the honey. And that honey can hold and retain that heat for a very long time once it's warmed up. So like you are when you jump inside of your bed on a cold night and you maybe move your legs back and forth because the sheets are cold until you can get that all nice and warm. And then all of a sudden you don't have to keep wiggling your legs around because you have created this envelope of warmth. That's what's going on inside of the hive using the honey.
Now,
so the bees heat it and then they eat it.
How is it that you can harvest the honey without killing the hive then?
Well, that's always the tricky part, right? It's how much honey can you take? And that's one of the things that we've learned at Bee Pods that we're trying to promote as a different way of doing it. We've got a whole bunch of different ways of rethinking beekeeping. And that is the idea that why don't you harvest in spring instead of harvesting in fall? Why don't you give them everything they have for winter and let them run through whatever they can do, and then come through fall or come through spring and harvest then. So we've actually got a bunch of honey that we're harvesting out of the hives that made it through the year because they've got excess now. And now that spring is beginning to happen, they're going to prefer the new stuff over the old stuff.
Right.
You know, you'd always want fresh over, you know, old, I guess, unless it's fermented meat or something like that. But for the most part, you know, that's as soon as they get fresh nectar sources, they start to prefer that. So you just pull the honey out then and be able to harvest what you can from them. But yeah, that's kind of the deal. The old way of doing beekeeping, which, you know, I'm not against the idea of a Langstroth hive or a stack box hive beekeeping. I'm kind of against the way it has been mechanized and optimized and proportionalized to basically be a tool for pollination of monoculture agriculture. That I'm not really a big fan of. Even though many people will tell you that that's, you know, the only way we can feed the planet, but these are the same people who are profiting richly off of owning every aspect of that except for the work part, which the farmer is stuck doing. But, you know, as any farmer will tell you, they have to pay the price for the seeds from the chemical company, and then they have to pay the price at the mill at the end, which is set up by the chemical company. So in the middle, they find their way of living, but in between, they're caught at the front end and the back end of that scene. And I think a lot of beekeepers have converted themselves in the last 100 years to become basically just pollinators or mechanized creature carriers, and they take these bees from field to field, monoculture field to monoculture field, making extreme profits from being a way to get these monoculture fields pollinated. But they're realizing that along with these profits come huge expenses, and they're starting to buckle under the weight of the expenses because these living organisms can't act like a ball bearing. They can't just go for 1,000 miles worth of this, that, and the other thing. They're living organisms. And this is what we've got that's starting to happen to us, is the proceeds of a system gone awry, or a system where we've taken, nature and try to bend it to our will or bend it to a machine. So bees would rather make the honey, and rather the honey that they make come from multiple sources, like we do when we go to a supermarket and say, I want to go shopping. I don't go and buy a cartload of potatoes. I go and buy a little vegetables, a little fruit, a little breads, a little dairy, a little this, that, and the other thing, and I have a balanced, diverse diet. What we've kind of been doing with the bees is trucking them over to the almonds and saying you're going to eat nothing but almonds for the next 3 weeks. And then I'm going to take it away because I want to sell almond honey because some people like that. And I need to have empty boxes on top of you because you're going to be running up the street to the peaches now, and I want you to eat nothing but peaches for the next 3 weeks. And I'm going to take it away. And I want to run you up the street to the raspberries, and you're going to have nothing but raspberries. And now the worst part of it is these beekeepers have been doing what their parents and grandparents have been doing, and that's putting some sort of substitute diet in their boxes while they load them up on trucks and take them from dining opportunity to dining opportunity. And the stuff they put in is called corn syrup. And maybe 50 years ago, corn syrup was okay because it was made from corn.
Actual
but today,
natural corn.
Yeah, 90%, 93% of the corn in the United States of America is now genetically modified to include systemic neurotoxins in them, neonicotinoids. That means that corn kills bees. That means that corn syrup kills bees. That means that in between taking them to giant monoculture fields to do things that they're not naturally wanting to do in the first place, in between that, they feed them poisons. And somehow we call this colony collapse disorder and pretend that it's some sort of mystery.
Well, and without bees, we have no food either. So there's a real problem right there.
Yeah, but there are memos that have been circulated a little here and there about, some of the big agribusiness companies hoping to crack the self-pollination keys by the end of the decade. And we've seen it with some of the oranges that are now self-pollinating and some of the things that they're trying to roll out. But again, we never have an opportunity as the public to discuss these manipulations to our planet's way of doing things.
No, what we have is American Idol. What we have is football and basketball and everything to distract us from the crap lives we live in cubicles. We're no longer a part of the living organism that is this planet. We've been distracted from it.
Yeah, we're not participants anymore. We're just tourists on the side that are fed popcorn and told to watch the show. There's a great article that just came out yesterday that was by the Friends of the Earth, and it was written by what the heck's her name? Let me pull it up. Michelle Simon, and it's called "Follow the Honey: 7 Ways Pesticide Companies Are Spinning the Bee Crisis to Protect Profits." And it is a stellar article that basically is comparing what's going on today in public opinion to what has been done from the tobacco industries and global warming, kind of the oil business, all of this thing about manufacturing doubt and putting just enough debate into the fields to keep the prospect of continued studies going as long as possible, because they know their product kills. And so rather than admitting it, they're saying, let's just keep studying this until we come up with something.
Let me ask you another question then. What do we do about it?
Well, what you're doing and what I'm doing and what everybody should do. And that's just waking up
from the rooftops
and spreading the buzz. Yeah, you gotta, once you start to, and this is what's so cool about bees. They're such a great, ambassadors of this.
You went
message.
there. You did.
Sorry.
Continue. You were going with, I had to call you out on that one.
Hopefully not too many more times. But yes, I think that, the bees give us a great story because it doesn't matter where your political, position-wise. It doesn't matter where your opinions are about, one type of person or another type of person or a location where they might come from. Everybody knows about food, and everybody knows we need food, and everybody knows that bees have something to do with food. And so the big thing is to try and get people to understand just how important it is and just how perverted it has gotten. And then just say either change with your wallet, vote with your wallet, or begin to just vote with your mind as to who's following what type of rules and who's kowtowing to who. And unfortunately, it's a hard thing to do because it seems that companies like Bayer and Monsanto and Syngenta and Dow and DuPont and the like are bipartisan. They don't mind who they own in office.
Yeah.
It seems that, Barack Obama was supposed to be a great person to bring about hope and change, but he seems to have, I don't know, either run into a wall that says, you're going to do it this way, or you can follow Martin Luther King or something, or Kennedy or something. I don't know.
Well,
but certainly the myth that the Democrats would save the day has been kind of ruined.
Yeah, we were supposed to have a transparent administration. And that didn't happen either. So,
follow the strings up. They're puppets, man.
They follow the money.
Follow the money, and
Totally.
that's the strings that I'm talking about. You've got a puppet master somewhere that's got both sides of the row. I wish that we.
And it's not an easy answer to it because we don't have a true third party. It was so apparent during the 2000 and 2004 elections when all of our news media said that we were a two-party democracy.
Yeah, I think Ron Paul was sitting up there saying that we weren't, but hey, nobody wanted to listen to the old guy, right? And I'm sorry. Let me get back on. I'll get on a political rant here.
Yeah. You can't see it, but Don's face just turned from a nice peachy color to bright red.
Yeah.
And steam's coming out of his headphones.
So I agree with everything you're saying. So I do want to go back to that whole, control thing and what you can do, because I think you hit the nail on the head. You can vote with your wallet and
your actions.
And I think you need to move local. And I think, teach and not participate in their system. So.
Yeah. So here's something. On May 24th, of this year, there's another worldwide march against Monsanto.
Yep.
And you can participate in any town that you're in, or decide to go to, a bigger town nearby and try and see what's going on. There are, I think, Facebook pages and websites, March Against Monsanto or Millions Against Monsanto, that you can join and see where they are activating. And there are lots and lots of people that will come out and teach to try to empower us all to understand. I've been doing them for the last 3 years, I think. We've got this one coming up now, and we hope to be able to engage a lot of people in the greater Milwaukee area and make signs and dress up like bees and have a bee die-in and engage the community at large that doesn't really know about these things. And it's neat when we have a nice sunny day and we walk past a bunch of people that are in the open air restaurants and they're all like, "What are you doing? What are you talking about?" And you look at them and you're like, "Do you know what you're really eating?" And if you catch them, they kind of go, "Well, no. Should I?"
Yeah.
Like, well, yes. I think, if you wonder why there's such a rise in autism and ADHD and all of these systemic neurological disorders in us humans, you can lay the rapid increase in occurrences over the map of how much imidacloprid and how much clothianidin and how much of these systemic neurotoxins, and then previous to them, they're topically applied direct applications have been introduced into our food system. So I actually did a map using some of the USDA data showing how much of this stuff has been applied since 1992 when it was introduced. And it was up until 2006 that they topically applied. And these pesticide companies were beginning to understand that their profitability curves were running out. They were getting to a point where they couldn't apply any more toxins to the plant without killing the host. When nature finds a way around whatever it is you apply to the field, you can either double the dose or double the frequency of application, but at some point in time you hit this point of diminishing returns. And they saw this around 1996, and they started buying up seed companies, and that's when Monsanto changed from being a chemical company to being the world's largest seed provider. So now they're a seed maker that owns more patents to seeds than God does.
Yeah.
And I don't remember that ever coming up to public discussion or debate.
We've had a few rants on what those guys are doing, and vote with your dollar. Exactly. So we've got a limited amount of time left. We need to get you. Here's a call to action. Go to beepods.com. Make sure you put an S in there because beepod.com takes you somewhere else. beepods.com. Check out this awesome device that he put together. This is awesome. I'm probably going to be getting one. My backyard's a little small, so I'm going to have bees like right next to the back porch, and my wife will never go back there ever again.
Yeah.
Your wife will love it. In fact, we've got a few of them on little porches on 14th floor apartments in the Bronx. You don't need much room. Yeah, the bees go out and forage. They'll look out over a 2.5 mile radius from your house and help everyone that has flowers in their backyard and gardens without them even knowing that those bees are out there. That's the miracle of the bees. They've been out there for a very long time. In fact, bees were essential to farming back in the earliest days, even to when we had 40-acre farms and small farmers communities. They had a beehive because it brought the pollination to their field, but it also brought medicine and health and well-being to their family. So this is what we're trying to offer by bringing this cradle back to your house. You don't have to set it up in the back fields like you do the high-rise apartments of the stack boxes. You can put it right next to your kitchen, and you can use it as a medicine chest, as a spice chest, as a sweetening chest. So what I do is I'll go out in the morning with a cup of tea, and I'll lift up one of the top bars, and I'll take my spoon and put it in and grab a little bit of honey, and I'll put it in my tea, and I'll watch the bees go off to work before I start my day.
Oh, how cool.
So I've got so many questions, and we're out of time, but we've got Africanized bees here in Arizona, and I've heard they take over hives. Is that something that I need to be worried about if I have a little hive in my backyard?
I'm not a very good expert on it because they haven't come up to Wisconsin yet. But I've been down to Arizona a number of times and been with the Africanized bees. And as a backyard beekeeper, it does mean the game's changing a little bit. It does mean that you've got to be a little more protective around the hive. But it's about defensive behavior and how bees react. Bees are not aggressors. They're defenders. And these Africanized bees are not necessarily aggressive. Their perimeter of defense is further out.
I see.
And I think if humans had half of their population destroyed in the last 6 years, we'd have a heightened perimeter of defense as well. So I look at Africanized bees as being kind of a result of this bee genocide. And them saying, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing near me? Are you going to kill me? You'd like you killed everybody else?
Right.
So I respect a little bit of how it's occurred, and I respect that when you work with a hive and you are gentle with the bees because you're doing a one-on-one beekeeping experience, it's not as severe as some of the hive situations where you're having to go through so many hives in an hour's time or a period of time that you have to get kind of rough and tumble with the bees in order to accomplish the job that you need to do. So I think in some ways they're sort of saving themselves by being that way and saying that some of this commercial pollination stuff's getting harder and harder to do. But I don't know. I'm not an expert on Africanized bees.
Well, and we're going to talk to a local beekeeper here in another episode who's going to kind of go over some of that stuff as well. So what I'd like from you is, real quick, we know the beepods.com, and what products do you offer? Can somebody go to your website and buy everything they need in order to get started beekeeping at home?
Yeah. We're in the middle of a 2.0 revision of the website. So if you go right now, it's a little clumsy, but we are ramping up on production right now to a system. So what we've done is we've kind of refocused on all the different aspects of beekeeping, relative to the bees. And so we've got all of the equipment and gear that you can need to do it. We've got the top bar hive, and what we've done is we've kind of made a vented top bar hive. So we've allowed bees to do what they do best, which is HVAC. They're experts at controlling the climate within whatever kind of a space that they find. And what we found is by spreading the bee colony out sideways instead of up horizontally, it works a little bit better, up vertically. It works a little bit better because you're only cutting into the hive. You're only lifting walls up as opposed to tearing floors and ceilings apart. So the bees are not as defensive. They become very friendly to touch. And that's why I say that you can bring them closer to the house than the stacked box type of a hive. So we've got videos that show you how to do it. We've got instructions and information. We even made a hive inspection form that teaches you to think like a beekeeper. Beekeeping is kind of like pattern recognition. Bees are creatures of pattern, and beekeepers are recognizing these patterns and trying to anticipate those patterns. So we have a conversation with bees, a dialogue with bees, as we look at them and go, wow, you guys look like you're working really hard to keep the humidity out of the hive. How can I close that hive up so that that humidity goes away? Or it looks like it's super hot in there and you're working really hard to blow air through there to get the temperature down so that your queen can be in that 85 to 95 degree area. Why don't I open up a whole bunch of ventilation for you so that you can use the natural ventilation of the box? So this is what I'm kind of redefining beekeeping as. And the last thing that we're trying to do is to make this an educational tool that you can then bring into your schools, bring into your yards, bring into your communities and say, I'm going to try and host a bee colony here. Now, Africanized bees make it a little bit more scary, but if you're gentler with the bees, they will respond in a more gentle way. And the trouble that we have is the bees in the fields are dying.
Right.
So this idea of keep them out in the country was great 20 years ago, but it's not working anymore. And the solution that the commercial beekeepers have is to make sisters of sisters of sisters of sisters, right? The wheat requeen over and over and over again. So we're squeezing our genetic diversity down. So we've got a bunch of hillbilly bees out there. And we're chemically altering the gut microbes.
I found that kind of offensive.
Well, I don't mean it in an offense. I mean it in the most polite way. But we've got a bunch of bees that are not as robust, even in their biology and their insides. And we need to try and bring that diversity back. And how we're going to do that is to have more beehives in more backyards or more eyes on less bees. So if we can have many people with 1 or 2 or 3 hives in their yard as opposed to these trucking bee companies that have 20,000, 10,000, 8,000, 5,000 hives, we'll have a little bit more localized diversity. So some of the bees that made it through the winter up here, I'm going to make queens of, and I'm going to try to use that knowledgeable diversity that knows what's around here and knows how cold it gets or how warm it gets, and see if I can't make some bees that can withstand this and flourish within in our Wisconsin temperatures. And as we start looking at other places, we should have some Montana bees, and we should have some Vermont bees, and we should have some, New Jersey bees, and we should have some Iowa.
Love the idea.
Stuck around. Yeah.
So, we've got beepods.com. Are you on Facebook as well?
Yeah, right now I think Facebook, unfortunately, might be the best place to find us because all of the Beehive customers are all chiming in and showing pictures of their own backyards and showing pictures of what they've been doing. It's a great resource. It's one of the best blogs that we have. Being able to say what's going on with your beehive. So, yeah, beepods.com on Facebook and Beepods on Facebook are both vehicles that we use to be able to disseminate information out and to share the buzz.
We're out of time for today, so I wanted to say thank you. We appreciate it. We're going to do a follow-up episode about beekeeping again here real soon, too. So thank you so much for all your time.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Man, what a great interview. This guy, he knows his stuff, and you can tell he's passionate about what he does.
Well, the fact that we grow ours. This is what we're doing. This is what this is about, is teaching. We found a teacher.
That's exactly.
He's a teacher at heart, I can tell.
Exactly. I think that in a future conference, we're going to have this guy into town.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to fly him in just to teach people how to do something here. So, again, we're going to continue on the bee topic next week. So definitely join us for that. And we're going to talk a little bit about Africanized bees, get a little bit more into that.
Yes.
So I'm excited, man. This bee thing is really cool. I'm getting excited about it. I can't wait.
I'm excited too. I'm going to see if I can convince the missus that we need a bee pod in the backyard.
Well, I kind of like the name too, Bee Pod. I mean, I happen to run a company called EcoPod.
Hey,
look at that. I like that whole pod thing,
Awesome.
And Nick sells rabbit pods, so.
Yeah. What? No. Okay, yeah, maybe. No.
So, I want to also, do you have a plug of the week this week?
No, I don't.
All right.
Why don't you guys that are listening out there that want to promote something, call us up, give us a plug of the week, and tell us why.
Yeah, wegrowers.com/askus.
Mm-hmm.
There's a spot in there. We get a lot of questions, but we don't get a lot of people recording. If you guys have questions that you want to hear your voice on the show, that's where you go to do it. Go record it. Send me the link to it. It generates a little link. Put it right in there. We'll get you guys right on the show asking your questions. We had a question actually last week about bees, and I kind of held off on answering it because it was, hey, would you do a bee episode? So, yes, we will.
Yes, we like doing bee episodes.
Yeah. So, yeah, this was an awesome interview.
They're much better than bee movies.
We've got some fun stuff coming up, so make sure you keep an eye on the We Grow Ours website. We're trying to do a little bit more blogging. I'm trying to get Nick to do a little bit of blogging. Since I write the majority.
Write so good.
Yeah, well, I'll edit it for you. Just write it and put it out there.
Do you accept colored crayon?
Sure.
Don's getting desperate.
Yeah, I'll scan in your little images for you. So take a picture of it and just text it to me. We're good. So,
grammar.
Yeah, Facebook.com/WeGrowOurs. We need some love on that site, please. If you like the show, go to Facebook.com/WeGrowOurs and hit the like button.
Yeah, there's like 3,000 of you guys a freaking month. Come on, get out there, like us.
Yeah, like us. We're doing
I think we're barely over Twitter. 300. What are we at?
Yeah, like 300 and something on We Grow Ours on Facebook. So go show us some love. Go hit that button. Give us your feedback on the site, good or bad. We're always happy to hear it. We'll have a discussion about it. We've got a lot of shows coming up. We're going to get into politics. I'm working on getting a couple of neat things coming along, I think. I want to get a little bit more into this whole politics thing with Monsanto, and I'm going to put on my tin hat. So we're going to have an episode coming up on that. Our governor, Jan Brewer, just passed this little thing about getting Arizona ready for an EMP. Did you see this, Nick?
No.
Yeah. So, we talk about SB 1151. This is a tool that we can use to get that implemented, because she's asking about what does Arizona need to do to be ready for an EMP? Well, the answer is, backyard chickens would be a really good way to do that and to start allowing those so people have food in their backyards.
Exactly.
Pushing the whole backyard gardening. So, guys, join us over there for the discussions. We want to hear your show ideas. So make sure you interact with us so we're on the right track and we can keep going with what our audience wants to hear, which is you. So if you're listening, go do that. Check us out on prepperbroadcasting.com on Mondays at 8 Central as well. So anything else you got?
That's pretty much it.
All right. Well, until next week.
Yeah, stay classy, San Diego, or Arizona, or whoever's listening.
All over the world.
Stay classy, Earth.
Have a good one.